Casey Phillips here with senior writer and editor Scott Smith. We are doing our second of our 3-day in a row Buccaneer Insider Live presented by Miller Lite Blitz to get ready for everything you guys need to know. I know, I came up with that.
Like that. Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's something our team is good at. And I just figured, we were going to hop on that here. Yes, we are blitzing with all the content for this week. And of course, we want to know what you guys want us to talk about. So if you're not already watching on Facebook, head on over there. And underneath our live video, you can leave questions in the comments section for us while we give people a chance to do that. Tell us some of the things that we have learned about, particularly Vita Vea and Antonio Brown since our show yesterday.
Yeah, we didn't learn a lot about Vita Vea, and the reason is the Bucs held their Wednesday practice at walkthrough speed, which is not uncommon at the end of the season. Guys are banged up, and that game in New Orleans apparently was very physical. So they really coach didn't really want to run them just yet. They'll start running at full speed today. It's not unusual. They do that all the time. But what that means is you don't really know how well Vita ran because he didn't. He walked, and Coach Arians said he walked real good. So that was his analysis. We'll have to wait another day to see how he's feeling in terms of really going full speed. Antonio Brown did not practice. It again strikes me as a similar situation to Mike Evans in the Washington game, where he had the injury, had the MRI that revealed there was no structural damage, was called day to day. At the beginning of the week, nobody was sure, didn't practice right away, and then eventually got in some limited work and was able to play. So if AB can come back either both or one of the next 2 days and get some limited work in, then we can feel a little bit better about his being available on Sunday in Green Bay.
And I know that we had a few different people speak to the media yesterday. What are some of the things that you learned outside of the injury front for the two of those guys?
Nobody's really worried about the cold. Everybody outside of the Buccaneers is worried about the Buccaneers playing in the cold. The Bucs themselves are not really worried about it. A lot of the guys, like Tom Brady, as an example, have plenty of cold weather experience. Some of them from college, like our Minnesota rookies, and basically they don't feel like 28 degrees, which I guess is the estimated kickoff temperature, is really all that bad. We talked about it yesterday. There's so many things on the sideline to keep them warm. And then when you get in the game, you're running around and you don't really feel cold. So, hopefully they're right and they're in the right mental state of mind, because that's what somebody said, that it was basically it's a mental issue and nobody's worried about it. The run game is really a big topic of conversation, because again, at this time of the year, people often talk about how the run game becomes more important in the playoffs and as you're getting towards the end, and that's especially true in cold weather games. And the Bucs have fresh legs and a pretty nice run going right now with Leonard Fournette and Ronald Jones. And then stopping the Packers run is important because, and not easy to do, they have 3 guys in their backfield that are pretty good and playing well right now. And it's, if you can slow those guys down, as the Bucs have been able to do against a lot of our offenses, it makes it harder for Aaron Rodgers, that is, to be so effective on play action, which he has been this year.
Yeah, and we did have a question about if Ronald Jones was playing and healthy, because he had just come back this last game, and there were a couple moments where it looked like maybe he was still favoring that quad a little bit, even though he did run really, really well. So is he good to go from everything we know?
Yeah, he's basically at the same spot he was last week in terms of the injury report. He is on there and he is limited in practice, so it's still there. Somebody asked him about the quad and combined with cold weather, and if that was an issue, but he says he'll be, he'll take care of it ahead of time to be ready for that game. I don't think it's really that much of an issue. He, like you said, there were moments where it looked like maybe it was bothering him a little, but when he got the ball, he ran really, really well. So, when he's been healthy or, not on a reserve list down the stretch, he's looked really good. So that combination of Leonard Fournette, who looks like a different beast here in the playoffs, and Ronald Jones is pretty good to have going into this game.
Absolutely. And we had a question asking, if you were to compare talent and balance on both sides of the ball for the Super Bowl team and this year's team, which team would you select?
Yeah, I think I get the point of this question. This team is more balanced in that, and I actually did a little study on this yesterday in terms of points scored. Obviously, the 2002 team, that's since 2002, the NFL has gone increasingly towards more and more and more scoring. So you can't just do a one-on-one comparison. The Buccaneers scored 30.8 points per game this year, which is easily a team record. but you have to compare it to eras because the league as a whole was averaging 24.8 points per game per team, which is the highest in NFL history. So what I did was compared all the years in team history, their scoring offense and defense against the average. And the Bucs this year, their scoring defense or scoring offense is better against the average than it's ever been. And the scoring defense was better against the average by somewhat a decent margin. The 2002 team, that defense was legendary, and it was like 75% better than the scoring average of the league as a whole. Average gave up like 12.5 points per game, but the scoring offense was basically almost dead on average. So that team was so heavily leaning towards how great that defense was that when the offense became a little bit better in the playoffs, they barreled through everybody. As you saw, this team in 2002, I don't think you could say either side of the offense, either side of the ball is as incredibly dominant as they were in 2002. But yes, it's probably a more balanced team.
Okay. And
Richard, that was a long answer, wasn't it?
Yes, but
you know got time for any more?
Yeah. Richard asked, is this the best rookie class the Bucs have ever had?
Oh, probably not, because I mean, I know it's only two guys, but in 1995 you drafted Derek Brooks and Warren Sapp, not in that order, in the first round, and those guys are both in the Hall of Fame. So even if it's just two guys, that's pretty good. There's been some other really good classes like 1997 with Rondé Barber and a bunch of other guys. I'd have to sit down and really do it, look into it a little bit harder to answer that question. But off the top of my head, I wouldn't say yes to that question. Also, in part because it's only been 1 year. And yes, you look like you have absolutely star caliber players in Antoine Winfield and Tristan Wirfs. But let's give it a little time to see how the whole class works out.
Right. You'd have to compare it to other rookie classes after their first year only.
And they might have an argument there, but even so, I bet it's not the most impactful rookie class we've ever had.
And this is interesting. Somebody asked about Mike Evans. We've talked about these other injuries. I think we kind of just, because he was able to come back and score a touchdown and everything, and that he has played in the playoffs, that we forget that there's a chance he may not be 100%. Still, do we know kind of where he's at in terms of how healthy? Is he healthier than these last couple games? Was he maybe on, a bit of a pitch count, or, that were they withholding some things these last couple weeks, and the percentage he would be at this week?
Well, he's basically in the same spot he was last week, as is Chris Godwin, I believe. Although last week Chris Godwin was dealing with quad and hip injuries, and this week it's just quad. But both of those guys were limited to start practice. And that's based on an estimation, because when you do a walkthrough, everybody sort of walks through. So for the official injury report, you have to estimate what they would have done if it had been full speed. So if the team is estimating that they would have been limited, then the trainers obviously know that they're still dealing with something that's, keeping them from being at full speed. But when we got to the game last week, I don't think either guy was really limited. So it's this time of year when a good number of players on your team are dealing with injuries that, aren't fun and aren't easy to work through, but they manage to work through them. So I don't think we have anything to worry about from those guys when we get to the weekend. But yeah, right now they're a little limited.
Delvin had asked, should Jason Light be in consideration for Executive of the Year?
I mean, obviously, Bruce Arians said so for sure. Yeah, because it worked. I mean, the talent on this roster, listen, the idea of this roster, or that the team had about this roster last March, was, I think we're close. We've got talent all over the place. We've got a defense that's really, really coming on, which is what Bruce Arians, and when he got here and with Jason Light, really wanted to make sure they did first, was build that defense, because he knew we had offensive pieces in place. Then to add Tom Brady on top of that and to have it work out so well, basically exactly the way you wanted it to, that's good drafting, followed by, realizing what you had and making some very bold moves and making it happen and having it all worked out. I mean, what more do you really want from the guy building your team? So we're biased, quite obviously, but right. I can't see how he wouldn't at least be among the small handful of people being considered for that.
Yeah, I completely agree. Dustin had asked, will Aaron Stinnie be starting again? And what did you think of how he stepped in for Alex Kappa?
Yeah, Aaron Stinnie will be starting again. And all I can say about how he handled it was, I mean, you look at how the offensive line went as a whole, and we all know that you can be very, very talented on the offensive line. But if you have one player in that group who isn't playing well, your offensive line as a whole has a good chance of not looking good just because of one guy. It's that whole, weakest link in the chain thing. And it's really true for an offensive line. What I found interesting was Ronald Jones said they put him in there, and then they didn't give him extra help. They didn't chip block for him. They didn't, make sure they were double teaming everybody that he had to block. They just put him in there and said, you block your guy one-on-one, and he did it. So really, really standout performance by Aaron Stinnie. And yeah, he'll start again in Green Bay.
Okay. And Thomas asked, do we expect to be able to get a lot of pressure on Rodgers?
Well, we want to. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to on both sides, really. You got these two quarterbacks that if they have too much time to throw, and the weapons they have around them, they're going to be really hard to stop. And the pressure was the difference in week 6. Our offense didn't go crazy in week 6. We had a pick 6, and we had another really short field on another interception. And I think we had maybe 320 yards of offense, which is well below our average in that game. But obviously the Packers had by far their worst offensive game, and Aaron Rodgers did. And it was because he got pressured. We had 5 sacks and 13 quarterback hits in that game. And for the most part, Tom Brady didn't get hit at all. And there's your difference. And that's easy to say, and say, duplicate that on Sunday in Green Bay and you can get another win. And that could happen. Hopefully that will happen. But the Packers have a good offensive line, and they are going to try to make sure that doesn't happen. So I can't predict if we're going to get the pressure on or not, but I do believe that will be the key to the game.
And Daniel asked, is Fournette our new number 1 running back?
I don't think we have one right now. I think it's a 1-2 punch, as Bruce Arians called it, or a 2-headed monster, as some people would say. And as we know, and we've probably said a jillion times on these shows, it really doesn't matter who your starting running back is. If those guys are splitting carries almost straight down the middle like they did in New Orleans, what does it really matter who took the first one? And I know, and and Bruce Arians even said it again this week, that if one of the other guys is particularly hot, they will ride that guy. So sure, call Leonard Fournette the starter right now if you want to, but it doesn't really matter.
And we had, let me see, who was it that asked this? Emmanuel said, will the team go to Green Bay a few days early to get ready for the game?
Nope.
And you want to explain why that is? Well, COVID stuff. That's a big part of it. Yeah.
Well, then you explain it.
Well, yeah. I mean, essentially, I think teams like to keep things their normal routine anyways. And It is normal for teams to only go a day ahead. So even COVID aside, teams tend to only go the day before. They want to stay in their normal routines, stay in their normal, houses, all that stuff. But then there's also the factor of that with COVID, they definitely want to stay in their bubble as much as possible. You don't want to have to go to hotels and other places where you're more exposed than you have been at home. So that has definitely emphasized how much teams have tried to not travel until as late as possible. And they've even kind of helped some of those rules, even of the rules of how early you had to go in the past. So I think that's definitely part of it.
Yeah. And what is the advantage to going early? I don't get that part of it. Why would you want to go early?
Potentially they were asking about adjusting to the cold. I've seen a few people ask about that, if maybe they wanted to practice in the cold beforehand. But yeah, I don't think that's really part of their plan.
No, it's definitely not.
Yes.
I've seen the travel plan. They're leaving on Saturday.
They're leaving on Saturday. Yes. All right. Well, thank you guys so much for all those amazing questions. Thank you for watching. And again, we will be back here tomorrow morning. I know we didn't get to every question. So if we didn't get to yours, make sure you come back here tomorrow morning, 10 a.m. again, and we'll answer some more of those in our final Buccaneers Insider Live before the NFC Championship game. So thank you guys for joining us. We'll see you tomorrow.